Welcome to week 2 of La Vuelta a España. After 9 stages, this 2025 edition is finally poised, with the big favourite Jonas Vingegaard sitting just 37 seconds behind leader Thorstein Train, with the chasing pack not far behind. Stages 10 to 15 will take us on a journey east to west across northern Spain, with some very tough climbs on the menu. We are pretty much halfway through this Vuelta 25, but there's still plenty of action to come. Stage 10 is 175 kilometres with 2 categorised climbs. First the Alto de las Coronas and then Lara Belagua, which is 9.4k at 6.3%. But will it throw up more surprises like Sunday? Well, today saw the biggest battle of the race so far to get into the breakaway, an early average speed of 50 kilometres an hour. After several more attempts, the GC riders were suddenly on high alert as Vingegaard attacked with Victor Campenaerts. Visma Lease Bike once again looking to catch out their rivals. Well, Vingegaard was soon brought back by the red jersey group, so panic over for the time being. After a brief lull, a group of around 30 managed to get a small gap, with lots of different teams represented. This looked like the move of the day. Well, they were soon approaching the first climb of Las Coronas, over 8 kilometres at 4.4%. A very handy-looking group indeed at the front, with the King of the Mountains, Jay Vine, Pablo Castrillo, Louis Fafaka and Kevin Vermarker. Mikhail Kwiatkowski was also up there with Sean Quinn, Bruno Armirail and Harold Tejada, while the best placed man overall was Junior Lasser, 4 minutes and 21 down on Thorstein Train.
Javier Romo from Movistar is trying to break away from the group of 30.
Well, Vine setting off in pursuit of Romo as they approach the summit. The Spaniard resisting and taking 3 King of the Mountains points at the top, 2 for Vine to slightly increase his lead. Well, Vine and Romo were soon caught by 6 more riders: Castrillo, Bernard, Ryan, Asparan, Conchi and Balderstone, and it looked like they would be going for the stage as Bahrain Victorious weren't chasing too earnestly in the bunch. Vermarker and Alex Segart also made it back to the front before the intermediate sprint, so 10 riders now in the breakaway. And Segart even decided to anticipate going solo before the final climb. Well, Segart began Lara Belagua with around 40 seconds on the rest of the breakaway. The peloton was still over 3 minutes down. The chase was somewhat disorganised for the time being. Further back though, UAE were increasing the pace in the peloton, with Ayuso working for Almeida. Well, Segart was eventually caught and dropped by Castrillo, the Movistar man making his bid for glory with 7.5 kilometres to go. He had a problem though, and it was wearing polka dots. The Spaniard joined by Vine, who was looking the fresher of the two. Thorstein Train was unable to stay with the rest of the GC group as Vine sailed away from Castrillo at the front, the Australian on course for another Vuelta double. In the favourites group, Almeida was upping the pressure, but Vingegaard was right there on the wheel, and ultimately there would be no major gaps. Train though would be saying goodbye to that red jersey. Castrillo giving everything, but he wouldn't catch Vine, who was preparing to celebrate his 4th Vuelta stage win and UAE's 4th of this edition.
The man leading the King of the Mountains classification, Jay Vine, is going to win at the top of the Alto de Belagua. An incredibly fast stage here on stage 10 to start week 2 of La Vuelta.
Well, Jay Vine doubling up at La Vuelta just like he did in 2022 and tightening his grip on the polka dot jersey. Vingegaard recovers the red jersey from Thorstein Train and now leads by 26 seconds from the Norwegian. Stage 11 is a relatively short one of 157 kilometres, although it still has over 3,000 metres of elevation gain. The 7 climbs are littered throughout the day, finishing with the Alto de Pique, a brutal hike of 2.3 kilometres at 8.9% that tops out with just 7.8k remaining. Whether it's a day for the breakaway or for the GC group, we are set for a spectacular finale. The first climb came after just 1 kilometre. And after a lively start, the first man to really chance his arm was Mads Pedersen in the green jersey. The former world champion was joined by Joel Nicolau, and they reached the summit together.
It's not just the points they're after, this is about trying to force their way into a breakaway.
But Visma Lease Bike weren't in the mood to let a big group go up the road, shutting down lots of early attacks, and the pace was too hot for some. Pedersen soon dropped Nicolau, the little Trek man looking in excellent shape, but the peloton were closing fast. Pedersen going again, and this time he was joined by two more riders, Marc Soler from UAE and Oluis Aula of Movistar. But Vingegaard clearly wasn't bluffing when he said he fancied winning today. Visma Lease Bike keeping the three leaders on a very tight leash and not letting anybody else join the move. The leading trio still a minute ahead as they embarked on climb number 3, the Balcón de Vizcaya. Well, Pedersen may also have been thinking about the green jersey points on offer today, but the intermediate sprint didn't come until 38k from the finish. Next up was the Alto de Morga, more than 8 kilometres at 3.5%, where Soler decided to up the tempo, pulling away from the punchier pair of Pedersen and Aula, who were quickly caught by the bunch. Soler maintaining that 1 minute gap as Nicolau and Louis Fafaka countered, going for mountains points. They were followed by Victor Campenaerts, just patrolling for Visma, and Santiago Buitrago, Fafaka second over the top. Fafaka kept chasing behind Soler for a few kilometres, but ultimately everybody was brought back before the Alto del Vivero.
A new situation, a new scenario, now that the race is all back together.
Well, there wasn't much of a lull as local star Mikel Landa then attacked. He's from around 50 kilometres south of Bilbao and was keen to be active today. Buitrago also on the move again. Well, they teamed up on the descent, heading back to the city with a small gap. And incredibly, Pedersen still had enough in the tank to try to chase them down.
This man is exceptional.
Pedersen joining a group of 5 chasers behind Landa and Buitrago, Campenaerts, Eddie Dunbar, Guillermo Martinez, Louis Rouland and Camille Bonheur. The Dane wasn't able to get back to the front before the sprint next to the Guggenheim Museum, but he still picked up 15 points for coming third. Visma still controlling the peloton as they approached the Vivero for the second time. Unfortunately, Landa was halted by a back injury, leaving Buitrago alone at the front.
Mikel Landa is in a lot of pain here.
Buitrago forging on solo with a lead of around 35 seconds. However, with the GC group upping the tempo, the Colombian was soon caught before an important announcement was made over the radio.
And due to some incidents over the finish line, the organisation and the commissaires panel have decided to take the time at the 3 kilometre to go marker.
There would be no winner for the 11th stage of La Vuelta then. It would be neutralised at 3 kilometres to go for safety reasons. The racing was still on though as they prepared to tackle the final climb, the Alto de Pique, with some very steep gradients that could open up the gaps. Well, Tom Pidcock unleashing a massive attack, with even Vingegaard struggling to hold the wheel, but the Dane did come back to the British rider just after the summit. The other favourites were set to lose around 10 seconds as the stage was neutralised on the outskirts of Bilbao. Stage 12 is another short and high-octane stage, just 145 kilometres between Laredo and Los Corrales de Buelna. After tackling the Puerto de Alisas early on, the big climb of the day will be La Collada de Brenes, 7 kilometres at nearly 8%, which will really sting the legs. It tops out with 23 kilometres remaining before a downhill sweep to the finish line. Well, the riders covered the first 30 kilometres to the base of the first climb without a breakaway forming. But once they started going up the Alisas, a group of 25 finally got a gap and more kept bridging across. It was more like 40 riders as they approached the summit. The best placed man overall was Bruno Armirail, almost 8.5 minutes down on Vingegaard, who'd put a teammate, Victor Campenaerts, into the move. There was a bit of a rumble for the King of the Mountains points at the top. Marc Soler pouncing ahead of Javier Romo and Carlos Canal to help defend his teammate Jay Vine's polka dot jersey. The group heading onto the descent as a dozen more riders attacked from the peloton. Well, among the riders in this big front group were Mads Pedersen, looking to tighten his grip on the green jersey, and some strong climbers who've been on the attack in recent days. Juan Ayuso, Santiago Buitrago, Mikel Landa, Pablo Castrillo and Mikhail Kwiatkowski. Well, the 12 chasers finally caught up to the front group with around 75k remaining, so we now had a mega breakaway containing more than 50 riders, and that's pretty rare on a Grand Tour. And by now it was obvious that the breakaway would contest the stage win. Pedersen adding another 20 points to his green jersey tally ahead of Slock and Kristen. Well, the riders crossing the finish line for the first time before heading out of town towards the final climb. And there was more action up at the front with 6 men attacking: Roland, Pickering, Sheffield, Shaw, Hessman and Gernelek. They were 30 seconds clear of the rest of the breakaway as they embarked on the Collada de Brenes. There would be no action back in the red jersey group, so now it was all about the stage win. Shaw making his move for EF with Pickering and Roland on his wheel. They would soon be joined by another group of around 10 riders, with Soler preparing to launch his teammate Ayuso.
Here we go, the big move from UAE Team Emirates XRG. Marc Soler has put Juan Ayuso into a position to try and win the stage 12 of La Vuelta.
Ayuso dropping everybody except Javier Romo. The two Spaniards going clear on the climb, with Roland fighting desperately to get back to them. The rest of the chasers soon found themselves around 40 seconds adrift. Romo leading Ayuso over the summit, and the two men flying into the descent and looking to maintain their advantage. They even started to play a few games, but they had enough of a gap to hold off the rest, and they would sprint for victory in Los Corrales de Buelna.
Romo has to keep an eye over his left-hand shoulder. It's Romo from Villafranca who's going to open up the sprint, and meanwhile Juan Ayuso has got the upper hand. Javier Romo, can he try and come round and deliver the first victory since 2021? No, he can't. It's going to be Juan Ayuso, a bang of the bars, and Juan Ayuso wins his second individual Grand Tour stage victory of this Vuelta.
Juan Ayuso showing his immense quality to double up and win a 5th stage of this Vuelta for UAE. It's career win number 16 for the 22-year-old. And no sweat for Vingegaard, who still leads Almeida by 50 seconds. Bruno Armoraj jumps up to 6th after his efforts in the breakaway. It's a day of Rampas in Humanas on stage 13 with 3 big climbs in the final. First up is the Alto de la Mosqueta, 6.3k at 8.4%, then the Alto del Cordal, 5.5k at 8.8%, before the mighty Anglerud, 12.4 kilometres at a grueling 9.7%. Plenty of GC dreams could be shattered on those brutal slopes. Well, 25 men got into the breakaway as they blasted through the first 2 hours of racing at over 50 kilometres an hour. There were fewer big names at the front than in recent days, but Mads Pedersen was up there yet again hunting for green jersey points, along with his nearest rival in that classification, Ethan Vernon. The peloton letting the gap ease out to nearly 4 minutes as they approached the first climb of the day, the Alto de la Mosqueta. On the early slopes, Remy Cavagna took control of the breakaway for his Groupama FDJ teammate Clément Braz-Afonso, a lot of riders soon dropping away. Back in the peloton, meanwhile, Tom Pidcock's Q36.5 team had taken over the pacing duties from Visma Lease Bike. Well, Jungels then decided to step things up a gear in the breakaway, with Cavagna and Braz-Afonso fading away. The Luxembourger looking strong as he led a group of 5 up the climb. He was joined by Tiberi, Garafoli, Nicolas Vinokourov and Jefferson Cepeda. A little further back, Pedersen was fighting to catch up again before the intermediate sprint, which was on the other side of the mountain. The Dane even dropping his fellow chaser, Hube Arts, last year's European Under-23 champion. The intermediate sprint was a formality for Pedersen, who sat up as soon as he had collected his 20 points. The rest of the front group heading on to the Alto del Cordal. Garafoli soon dropped, leaving Jungels, Vinokourov and Cepeda at the front. UAE taking over at the front of the peloton meanwhile, with the King of the Mountains, Jay Vine, working for Almeida and eating into the breakaway's advantage. Vinokourov was once again first over the top to make it 20 KOM points for the day. On the descent of the Cordal, Tiberi had a close shave, this crash ending his chances of getting back to the front. The stage and perhaps even La Vuelta would be decided on Angliru.
3 riders arrive at the base of the Alto dell'Angliru, the first especial climb of the 2025 La Vuelta a España.
The GC group was now around 2 minutes down, and Cepeda was the latest man to be dropped at the front. Youngles doing an impressive job, but the favourites were closing fast. UAE doing all sorts of damage, with Egan Bernal going backwards, and so too was Vinokourov, meaning Youngles would be the last survivor from the breakaway. Felix Großschartner putting in a big turn for Almeida, as Gal, Pellizzari and Pidcock all fell away from the red jersey group. And by the time they caught up to Youngles, there were only 4 of them left. Almeida, Vingegaard, Kuss and Hindley. And 4 would soon become 2, with Almeida and Vingegaard pulling away and preparing for a mano a mano on the Angliru. It was an absorbing final, with nothing to separate the top 2 on GC. Almeida still setting the tempo. The inseparable pair of Almeida and Vingegaard trading pedal strokes as they entered the final kilometre, but which of the 2 would be first over the line?
They come out of the fog, they come out of the mist, they bear the left-hand turn, they're into the sunshine. And is it going to be João Almeida who is able to crown himself the winner on stage 13 of La Vuelta? Jonas Vingegaard has been on this climb 2 times in the past. He finished second 2 years ago, but he wants that victory. It's going to be the Portuguese rider João Almeida who comes across the line. João Almeida crowns himself the winner at the top of the famous Alto dell'Angliru.
Well, João Almeida showing that nothing has been settled just yet, taking his 10th win of a brilliant season ahead of Vingegaard. The Danes' lead is now just 46 seconds, with Pidcock at 2 minutes 18. Hindley, Pellizzari and Riccitello all moved up 4 places, while Train held on in the top 10. Well, stage 14 will be short but intense, with 3,800 metres of climbing packed into just 136 kilometres. Like yesterday, the big climbs come in the final, with San Lorenzo 10 kilometres at 8.5% and then La Farapona 17 kilometres at 5.9%. Well, once again there was an almighty scrap to make the breakaway, with the GC teams patrolling the front to greenlight the moves or to shut them down. Eventually a group of around 20 riders broke free, with several familiar names up at the front. Kevin Vermaarke was enjoying his 4th breakaway of the race, while Gianmarco Garofoli and Jefferson Cepeda were up there for the 2nd day running. Marc Soler and Mikel Bjerg made it across for UAE, while Visma Leasebike had sent Victor Campenaerts up the road. They soon reached the first of the day's 3 climbs, the Alto de Tenebreo, nearly 6 kilometres at 6.5%, a nice little warm-up for the final. With the gap now up to around 5 minutes, the 24 men at the front will have started thinking about a potential stage victory. Well, there was no real fight at the intermediate sprint, with Dion Smith rolling through first, and they would soon hit San Lorenzo. The Italians in the breakaway attacking on the early slopes of the climb, first Garofoli and then Baggioli, but neither of them got very far. A change of pace in the peloton meanwhile, with UAE starting to rev things up, looking to make life hard for Almeida's GC rivals. Egan Bernal and Giulio Ciccone both going backwards. Well, the breakaway were all back together again, having caught Garofoli and Baggioli. There were still around a dozen at the summit of San Lorenzo, with Shaw first over the top and then attacking on the descents. The gap continuing to drop, with the GC group now at under 3.5 minutes, and it would soon be time to attack the final climb. The breakaway soon caught up to Shaw, but they didn't have any answers when Soler attacked with Johannes Storner-Mittet of Decathlon AG2R. Well, the peloton still trailed by around 3 minutes, so the 2 front-runners were looking good for the stage win, or rather Soler was, once he said goodbye to Storner-Mittet. UAE once again pulling all the strings, with Soler leading and his teammates pacing for Almeida in the GC group. Soler into the final kilometres with only Finlay Pickering still chasing. The rest had been caught by the GC group, with Giulio Pellizzari now on the front. The race's best young rider in white, lining things up for his leader, Jai Hindley.
And here we go. Here's the move from Jai Hindley of Red Bull Bora Hansgrohe. This is what Red Bull Bora Hansgrohe have been wanting to set up. And with gritted teeth, Almeida has to get himself onto the wheel of the man from Perth.
Soler arriving solo at the top of La Farapona and going one better than 5 years ago.
Just to make the breakaway was a difficulty. And he shakes his head. He punches the air. And Marc Soler is the winner for UAE Team Emirates XRG.
A little skirmish between the top two overall in the final 100 metres as they dropped Hindley, with Vingegaard second and Almeida third. Well, Marc Soler gaining a measure of revenge for 2020 when he was denied by Gaudu on La Farapona, his fourth Vuelta win. And UAE have now taken half of the stages at this edition, 7 out of 14. Vingegaard, though, still holds the red jersey by 48 seconds from Almeida. Stage 15 takes us from the Asturias to Galicia with 168 kilometres from Vegadeo to Monforte de Lemos. It starts with the Cat 1 Puerto a Garganta over 16k at 5%, and the bumpy terrain continues for much of the day with more than 3,000 metres of climbing. The second half of the stage is easier though, so if the sprinters can survive the start, they'll have a good chance of going for the win. As expected, the first two climbs provided the backdrop for the fight to get into the breakaway, with the peloton finally letting a huge group go up the road. No fewer than 47 riders made it, including the King of the Mountains, Jay Vine, who attacked with Louis Fafaka after picking up some early polka dot points. The peloton clearly had no intention of chasing them down, with Visma Lease Bike and UAE on the front, but letting the gap yawn out to over 10 minutes. Vine and Fafaka now led the rest of the breakaway by 2 minutes. The best placed man in the chase group was Junior Lasserre, 19 minutes down on Jonas Vingegaard. Lidl Trek had put no fewer than 5 riders at the front in their bid to finally land a stage win with Mads Pedersen. Well, the group of 45 now had to start chasing in earnest, with Vine and Fafaka almost 3 minutes ahead. The peloton also had to keep half an eye on the gap if they didn't want Lasserre to snaffle the red jersey from Vingegaard. There were plenty of big names in the chase group, including Bernal, Buitrago and Ciccone, plus informed riders like Vinokourov, Vermaker, Garofoli and Romo in yet another breakaway. There were also several fast men who could potentially rival Pedersen in a sprint, like Stewart, Aular and Plancart. Well, Lidl Trek are really putting the hammer down to bring Vine and Fafaka back as they look to win a first Vuelta stage since 2022 and end a run of 8 podiums without victory. First, though, they had to catch the two leaders, who still had 90 seconds in hand as they entered the final 40 kilometres. This one was going down to the wire. Well, the road soon began to rise again, and a few riders from the chase group decided to try their luck. Buitrago and Bernal attacking, and they were followed by Pedersen. Aular, Sheffield, Frigo and Dunbar also came across to make it 7 men just behind Vine and Fafaka. The rest of the chasers were quickly out of the running, with the Pedersen group working well together and gradually reeling in the two leaders. Vine and Fafaka were finally caught with just under 7 kilometres to go, and everybody knew that Pedersen was now the man to beat.
Mads Pedersen on the way. Oh, Magnus Sheffield has come down. Magnus Sheffield of the Ineos Grenadiers has slid out on the final corner. Meanwhile, at the front, Mads Pedersen is trying to take his 4th Vuelta stage victory. It's a long, drawn-out sprint. Here comes Alois Aular. Alois Aular, has he left it too late? Well, Mads Pedersen comes through.
After so many near misses at this Vuelta, Mads Pedersen and Lidl Trek finally have their stage victory. a fourth stage win at La Vuelta and the 60th of his career. Vingegaard will go into the final week with a 48-second lead over Joao Almeida. Lasser moved up to 9th place today, with Train slipping down to 10th. Well, Pedersen has taken a big step towards winning the green jersey by picking up 45 points today. He now leads Vingegaard by 98. Similarly, Vine has tightened his grip on the polka dot jersey. The Australian is 22 points clear. And 21-year-old Giulio Pellizzari is still in white ahead of Matthew Riccitello, with Lasser now third at 1 minute 28. That's it for week 2. 15 stages down, 6 to go.